John chapter 1, verse 29 to 31. The next day he saw Jesus coming toward him and declared, "Here is the Lamb of God, who takes away the sin of the world. This is he of whom I said, 'After me comes a man who ranks ahead of me, because he was before me.' I myself did not know him, but I came dunking with water for this reason, that he might be revealed to Israel." There is but one single lamb in all creation that merits the title Lamb of God, and that is the constellation labeled Aries by the Latins. In the book of Revelation, this constellation is directly identified as, quote, "the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David." That is, the Messiah of Israel. Revelation 5, chapter 5, verses 5 to 6. One of the elders said to me, John of Patmos, who's experiencing a sky journey, he's literally on the other side of the sky vault. He's been taken up. "Do not weep. The Lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David, has triumphed, enabling him to open the scroll with its 7 seals." Then, says John of Patmos, in vision, "I saw, standing in the midst of the throne," that's the sky vault, because God's throne is the sky, the solid sky vault, "and the 4 living creatures," these great constellations, "and the elders, a lamb that seemed to have been slain." The same is true here in John's Gospel, where John the prophet, or John the Dunker, identifies Jesus as Lamb of God, the constellation Aries. And his disciples conclude he is Israel's Messiah. John chapter 1, verse 29. The next day he saw Jesus coming toward him and declared, "Here is the Lamb of God, who takes away the sin of the world." John chapter 1, verse 36. John exclaimed, "Look, here is the Lamb of God." John 1, verse 41, Andrew first found his brother Simon and said to him, "We have found the Messiah." Before we go back into talking about the cosmic lamb, we got to talk a little bit about sheep and goats and close out the first hour with that. Is that okay?
Yeah.
All right. Because before we can talk about cosmic ram, let's first of all talk about earthly rams. Sheep and goats were some of the earliest animals to be domesticated, and they are still very common in the Middle East. Because they were so plentiful and important in the lives of ancient Israelites, the Hebrew language is replete, very rich in words that distinguish sheep according to sex and age. Moreover, this rich vocabulary flows over into the human domain. For instance, the Hebrew word for the adult female sheep, or ewe, is Raliel, which is also the name of one of Jacob's wives, Rachel or Rachel. The Aramaic noun for a newborn ewe lamb, a newborn little baby girl lamb, right, is Talia. And this word also was used as an endearing term for a little girl. Recall that Jesus called Jairus' little daughter, who had just died, Talitha. It means little lamb, little female lamb. The Hebrew word for ram, ayil, is often applied figuratively to princes, nobles, and mighty leaders. These linguistic tidbits open up a window on Mediterranean culture that helps us to understand the literal and symbolic meaning of sheep and goats in the Bible. Again, honor is a public claim to esteem or value, and a public acknowledgement of that claim. Failure to do so, refusal to do so, is to dishonor or to shame someone. Mediterranean men must assert, protect, and if possible, augment the family's honor. In the Middle East and the Mediterranean world, honor is the only thing. It's where everything gets its value from. Women are the most vulnerable point through which a family's honor can be challenged or even taken away. Hence, women are associated with shame in two ways. In a positive sense, a woman has to, in the Middle East and Mediterranean world, cultivate a sense of shame, a sensitivity to the honor of the family that could be stripped away at any moment. In a negative sense, when a woman is violated, whether willingly or not, she is the source of shame for the entire family. Honor and shame are core values that permeate the entire Mediterranean culture, in which Middle Eastern North African personalities belong. Honor and shame are therefore also reflected in the animals, sheep and goats. Sheep are primarily men's animals, and men take care of them. Goats are primarily women's animals. Goats are often kept in the house with the women. In the Middle Eastern mind, sheep symbolize honor, while goats symbolize shame.
The culture was so deeply seated that nobody could understand what John was getting at.
Well, here's the thing. If we take inspiration very seriously, we have to admit that John himself holds these values. He does believe in these values. He does perceive with these values, think about things in these values, interpret things in these values, and communicate these values. In reality, sir, in every page in the Bible, you're going to see these values reflected. You're going to see these values reflected. The Bible is a Middle Eastern, Mediterranean library.
You don't see them because you don't think that.
Exactly. We don't perceive reality that way. That's why we're bound to distort and misread and misunderstand the biblical texts. How much more true is this for John, an society's anti-language text? So going back, social scientists agree that human beings use animals to represent the internal differentiation of their society. Think about Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck and our animals and our anthropomorphisms that we use. Okay, we assign different meanings to certain animals, having the benefit of being 2,000 years later and in a completely different social context. We have a different approach to humility, to being humble, than this ancient world did. And we are going to assign animals meanings that ancient people did not. For instance, to us, a dog is loyal, man's best friend, right? So we're going to assign loyalty to a dog. And I'm sure that's the way it is everywhere, right? In the Middle East, too. Dog must mean that. No, dogs are considered vermin in the Middle East. They run wild, unless you're a very westernized Middle Eastern person, okay? You're living, having been educated and formed with Western values, you don't keep dogs as pets in the Middle East. They tend to run wild, even this day in occupied Palestine, okay? So the dogs licking the body of Lazarus, right? Remember Lazarus and the rich man? Oh, they're doing something merciful to him. No. They're waiting for him to die so they can eat him. You see, you don't see that necessarily the first time you read it, especially if you're a dog lover. You're going to read your own world and your own understandings into the text. It doesn't belong there.
Okay.
It's very hard to do this, by the way. Yeah.
In the Middle Eastern mind, sheep symbolize honor while goats symbolize shame.
Right.
So what they're basically saying is that women have no honor.
No, women have an honor. Women need to be focused on shame because women are deadly powerful in the sense that they can go off like a bomb at any moment and thereby strip the honor from the entire family. Women are the weak point. They have to be protected because they are the source of the shame of the family. Yeah. They're not hated in the Middle East. They're feared, women. Women are feared, not hated. I'm not saying that's good. I'm just saying that's the way it is, folks.
Right.
It's the way it is. And it's the way it's been for 4,000 years. You follow what I'm saying? And our Mediterranean ancestors were just like them. All right. So social scientists agree human beings use animals to represent the internal differentiation of their society. Let's talk about men and sheep. What struck our ancestors in the faith and contemporaries as well is the fact that sheep do not make noise when they are shorn or even when death is imminent. They suffer in silence without complaining. Deutero-Isaiah, author of Isaiah chapter 40 through 55, knew and attributed these qualities to the faithful servant. Isaiah 53 verse 7. Like a lamb that is led to the slaughter, and like a sheep that before its shearers is silent, so he, the servant, did not open his mouth. In his discussion with the Ethiopian eunuch, Philip applied this passage to Jesus. Mark portrays Jesus' death by crucifixion in precisely this fashion. For Jesus first shrieks after hanging 6 hours on a cross, and only just before he died. Young Mediterranean boys who are brought up with young Mediterranean girls are spoiled by all the women in the village. They're raised exclusively by the women, and they suffer from a lack of an adequate male role model in their early childhood. When they enter the male world at the age of puberty, around 12 years old, they must begin to learn how to be a Mediterranean male. In large measure, this learning entails realizing that silent endurance of suffering, even physical punishment, from all older males in the village, is a major way of demonstrating one's manliness.
Is that where we get men don't cry?
A lot of it comes from that, yeah, but we got to be careful because there's other things too, but this is a very different world than the world we're in, folks. This is a world on which your honor, the honor of your people, is the determining factor whether or not you starve to death. You understand? It's a different world. These are not introspective people. You do this to introspective people, you're going to scar them mentally and psychologically for life. And you try this kind of strategy of parenting here, you're going to be arrested, put in jail. So, spare the rod, spoil the child does not work in the United States. It doesn't work with introspective people. I'm sorry. But 80% of the world, a lot of these people employ this. I'm not making a comment one way or the other. I'm trying to say that where did that come from? Did that come from because people are cruel everywhere? It came from the situation that life situations are pretty desperate. And you need to maintain honor in which to survive. And that's the method of doing it, by raising avengers that can take unending punishment without flinching and not bring dishonor to their family. Unquestionably Mediterranean male. And try to understand this. Jesus hanging 6 hours on the cross, Mark and Jesus, is unquestionably a Mediterranean male. When that Roman soldier sees Jesus shriek out and die, right? He says, truly he was the son of the gods. You know what that meant? That's not him confessing something. That's not him confessing like what we confess from Nicaea and Constantinople, okay? Which we confess on Sunday and major feast days. He's not saying he's God from God, light from light, true God from true God. What he means that he's a son of God's is he's a badass. He's a Mediterranean male badass. Now see, here's the thing. You and I don't see that because we have this very sweet Jim Caviezel, beautiful Care Bear, Jesus who's my friend. Okay, try to understand that in the Middle Eastern world, okay, Jesus was unquestionably male.
And very respected.
And very respected for that. That he could die like that, that was a manly way to go. You understand? There's two ways in the Middle East you show your manhood. One of the ways is to suffer for a long time without flinching, without complaining, like a man, like a lamb, like a ram led to the slaughter. That's not a soft, cuddly image. That's a manly image. You understand? Honorable. Another way to do it is to show your manliness by having mastery of language. Being able to spin puns, riddles, being able to dominate an argument, being able to insult people. That sound familiar?
Yeah.
Let's continue. The sheep that suffers and goes to death in silence offers a good example and is easily accepted as a symbol of the honorable Mediterranean male. John, the book of Revelation, and Paul all develop the symbol of Jesus as Lamb of God. And they don't mean anything cuddly or Care Bear-like or My Little Pony-like. This is a new way of looking at Jesus, right? It's actually an old way. Oh, but goats, on the other hand, oh, well, in ancient Greece and Rome, goats were recognized as very lascivious animals. Goats tolerate sexual access of other males to females in their domains. When two male goats fight over a female, the winner will cover her first and then step aside to allow the loser to do the same. How dishonorable. With flocks of goats, more than two males often service the same flock. Shameful. Mediterranean males projected these same attributes to deceived husbands and cuckolds. Males who permitted other men to commit adultery with their wives because these males did not watch over and protect their women. Thus, the goat was, and still is, associated with shame and shameful behavior. This is preserved even in some present-day Mediterranean insults. If you live in South Florida, you have availability to it. What's the Spanish word for goat? Cabra. So I'm sure you've heard, oye, cabrón.
Right.
That's referring to what? That comes right from the world of the Bible, my friends. The Mediterranean world. Tu es pendejo. Okay? In contrast, one ram usually can service a flock of approximately 50 ewes. The shepherd must be very careful as the number of ewes dwindles, for rams will fight one another if one tries to encroach on the ewes of another. Thus, while the goat became the symbol of shame, the ram became the symbol of virility, strength, and fierceness. It is no wonder then that the very word ram was applied to kings, princes, and other honorable, mighty Mediterranean leaders. Indeed, the ram was associated with the honorable gods, Zeus, Apollo, and Poseidon. But the goat. The goat became associated with nature-like gods, such as Pan, Bacchus, and Venus, all known for shameful and unrestrained behavior. Women and goats. There's Aphrodite, Venus, with a goat, see? Now you get the meaning, right? The association of the goddess Venus with goats reveals additional insights about how women were and continue to be perceived in various Middle Eastern cultures. The common assumption is that women are, like goats, lascivious and unprincipled creatures. They are ever on the prowl, untrustworthy, the weakest links in every family. Because women are the most vulnerable to attacks on family honor, they must always be under the watchful eye and care of a male, father, brother, or husband. Recall the list of headaches that a daughter can cause for her father in Sirach chapter 42, verses 9 to 14. The daughter can be a burden that remains unmarried. Shameful. His daughter can be rejected by her husband. Shameful. His daughter can be raped before her marriage is consummated. Shameful. His daughter can be pregnant before living with her husband. Sound familiar? Who does that sound like?
Mary.
Shameful. His daughter can be unfaithful to her husband. Shameful. His daughter can be barren. Shameful. 6 headaches every father in the Bible has to deal with. The goat, perhaps because of traditional association with nature-like gods mentioned above, also came to be associated with the devil. Matthew 25, 33 to 41. He, the cosmic Son of Man, will place the sheep on his right and the goats on his left. Verse 41. Then he will say to those on his left, Depart from me, you accursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. Note the association between goat and the devil and his angels. From this emerged the Mediterranean association of women with both the goat and the devil. You see where our devil, some of our popular devil imagery comes from? Cabron, right? There you go.
In that culture, a woman doesn't even have a chance.
Well, yet, women have power in that culture. You see, they know that they're the source of shame. And they can get men killed very easily. They can manipulate males. They have to be brilliant in that culture. To be in that culture, be a woman, whew, you better be smart. So they're the intelligentsia of the village. They're always manipulating things to their advantage. It's interesting. It's interesting.
The smarter they are, the more they're associated with the devil.
That's true. It's true. All right, sheep and goats. Until the invention of the 4-for-1 plow, which improved agricultural production, sheep and goats were crucial for subsistence. They belong to the category of small livestock that produce milk, cheese, hair, and wool, and also meat. Yet, even here, considerations of honor and shame add significant dimensions to the basic meanings of nourishment and sustenance. The hair of Palestinian goats is long and black, and looks very much like human hair. It was and is most often spun and woven into a strong, heavy cloth used chiefly for tents like those of the Bedouins, or the tent cover of the tabernacle. The wool of the sheep provided clothing. It was much more commonly used than linen, though priest garments were said to be made of linen. And it was fulled to a pure white, which explains the Mediterranean proverbial expression, as white as wool, which appears throughout the Bible. As for the milk and cheese, contemporary cultural descendants of our Mediterranean ancestors in the faith give additional insights into the honor and shame dimensions of sheep and goats. Mediterranean men do not normally drink milk. Milk is for women, children, the weak, and the sick. Rather, Mediterranean men eat cheese, especially goat's cheese. One such Greek product we all are familiar with is feta cheese, right? And if they drink milk, it will be goat's milk, usually. Moreover, while women tend and milk the goats, the care and milking of sheep is essentially the man's task. Ordinarily, a shepherd should wash his hands after sexual intercourse before milking the sheep. But it is generally preferable that unmarried shepherds... I'm sorry, that was funny. I haven't asked about... Okay. But it is generally preferable that unmarried shepherds be assigned to milk the milking ewes. Sheep, goats, and religious significance. Because sheep and goats, even though goats are shameful, they're not unclean. Sheep and goats both are cud-chewing mammals with cloven hoofs. And the Hebrew tradition considers them therefore clean, even if one is honorable and one is shameful. You can be shameful and be clean. They're not polluting animals. Therefore, their meat, milk, and cheese can be eaten. The pattern that emerges from these reflections can be schematized thus. Sheep are honorable, goats are shameful. Men are represented by sheep. Women are represented by goats. Sheep are virile. Goats represent femininity. Sheep speak of a virile man, where goats speak of a cuckold, a deceived man. Sheep are strong, goats are weak. Sheep suffer to death in silence. Goats are noisy. Sheep, only men milk them. Women milk goats. Men do not drink the milk of sheep. They drink goat's milk or eat goat's cheese. Women, children, the sick, and weak drink the milk of sheep and goats. Sheep live outside. Like that's the place of men. Goats are inside. Sheep go to pastures in the outside, led by a male shepherd. Women keep the goats inside the home. Yes?
Will a Mediterranean man ever know that he was infertile? I mean, would that,
Oh, yeah, sure. That's a big test.
and what would happen then? How does he?
Well, in the ancient world, that's a big kettle of fish, Evelyn, because he wouldn't know it scientifically unless he couldn't produce anything. If he couldn't perform for whatever reason, then they would know, and the woman might make sure people know. But there's, how? Through the women and the children who are the gossip network. Women have ways. But let's say he could perform in bed with her. But it was really, he was infertile for some reason. But you would never know it from the various phenomena associated with the sexual act. Well, how would they know? It would actually get blamed on the woman, Mother Earth. That's what usually happened, right? All the way to Henry V and beyond, right? Mm-hmm. Sure. Henry VIII, I'm sorry. Henry VIII. Okay. The entire Mediterranean world is divided along the lines of the core cultural values honor and shame, which in turn are replicated in every other dimension of human life, beginning with gender. Let's take a short break.